I'll invite him in right now. We're close enough. Alright. Let's see how this goes. I'll be back in one sec, guys. He's popping in right now, probably. What's up, my dude?
Well, hello, hello.
Welcome in, man. How you doing today?
Well, a bit sunburnt from the beach, but otherwise, I'm all right.
Pros and cons to every good thing, right?
Yeah, yeah. I guess that's the bad part about living in Florida.
Yeah. Well, I know you had a couple days off. Enjoy your days. Chill, kind of ready to go?
Yeah, yeah, actually, I am. I'm ready to get this on. I've actually kind of laid out some ground rules with the guys that are in here so far,
Cool.
um,
So how
so
about
everybody
this?
knows the deal.
I'm gonna cut you off for a second here. But here's what we're gonna do. I'm gonna give you the stage as long as you want. Kind of lay out what you're about, kind of what your hope is with this, and then your ground rules. How about that? And I'll follow up.
Yeah, that actually sounds perfect. Okay,
Cool.
so my whole reason for my platform, yes, I'm a Trump supporter. I'm not gonna deny it. Everybody knows it. But I was independent first and foremost. And then after the last Bush election and the Obama election here, um, I made a shift. I didn't feel that staying neutral was the proper thing to do. Now, that being said, I have noticed that you no longer hear about that third party anymore. You hear Democrat, you hear Republican. And quite frankly, it's un American. And I'm tired of it. So it's time we bridge the divide between Democrat and Republican and bring this shit to a halt before a fight breaks out. Nobody wants that. I don't want that. Democrats don't want that. Our government sure in the fuck don't want that because I'm sorry. If we both rose up against a corrupt government, they don't stand a chance. So
100%.
I want to get all the bullshit out of the way, find the middle ground, and come together as one nation. Because we can't keep doing this. And that's what my platform was about, was open discussion. And that's exactly what's happening, so I'm ecstatic.
Cool. Yeah. Awesome,
Ground
man.
rules, ground rules, just be, it doesn't, put your political differences aside. Put your political affiliation to the side. Tonight it doesn't matter. Tonight what matters is the facts. Keep it chill, keep it real, no BS.
100%. So I want to start with ground rules on that note because I got a pretty decent amount of people in here. This is a hard rule, all right? People on my side of this shit, this is a hard rule. First of all, I've already seen a few nasty comments from my side of things in here. So, for example, that what the teeth comment, that's an auto boot, stuff like that. All right. I don't care if it's directed towards Republicans. I don't care if it's directed towards liberals. I don't care if it's directed towards. I don't give a shit who's directed towards. We are not doing that in these. That's not going to happen. That's a hard rule. All right. The whole point of doing this is to show people that we can have these conversations. Right. It can get contentious. We can even disagree fiercely at times, even right. But it will remain civil, and at the end of this, we'll walk away, and no one's going to get canceled. We're not going to go harass or bombard people or things like that. That's not going to happen, because if that happens, people are not going to want to continue to do this. All right? He doesn't have to step up to do this. I don't have to step up to do this. Right? The people I've invited who've accepted, they don't have to do this. All right? So if you guys want these things to continue, treat us with respect, like we're going to try and treat each other with respect. All right? So again, disagreement, beautiful. If you really think one of us got something wrong, let us know. But we don't do the cancel culture thing here, all right? We don't go and mass report people. We ain't about that. That's like my hard rule. And if I think someone's doing that, well, fair is fair, and I'll break my own rule, and I promise you, I'll cancel you with all my power. All right? It's fair is fair. So with that said, what am I about? Welcome to Mute the Media. Obviously, most of you probably seen some of my videos where I pop off. The end goal is to draw as many people in to have these types of conversations, because the reality of our society today is that if I go out there and I give some nonpartisan, super positive message that tries to draw people together, nobody fucks with that, left or right. But if I come up here screaming, everyone pays attention to that. So the sad reality is you got to make some noise. You got to kind of hit some shit to draw people in. The people who weren't going to hear that, they weren't listening anyways. And then hopefully the second level, you have a real conversation. So that's the kind of goal, and it's playing out here. That's all I got to say. So any topics you want to hit, my man? Or do you want to see what some of the comments say?
I guess we can go ahead and start off with a few of the comments if you want. because to be totally honest, a lot of what I keep getting on my side is like just the border in general. Like everybody keeps talking the border, not just the wall, not just the humanitarian crisis, but just everything about it.
It's just kind of
So I feel like,
immigration in general.
yeah, immigration and everything. Which I mean, I gotta just go out there and say, like, even as a Republican, I know that shit's fucked. Like
So how
I
about
had
that
a
then?
friend in.
Let's dive into
Sorry,
that
I
then.
had a friend. I had a friend that I went to school with in middle school. It took until from fourth grade till her senior year to become a citizen. So even I know that's screwed.
100%. I think you just brought up a good point right there. I think most people, left or right, are really open to the idea of making legal immigration easier, making it easier for people who are trying to come here and contribute to be able to do so, right? Um,
Yeah.
but for some reason, it seems like we can't get that accomplished, right? What would you attribute that to? When you think of immigration, where like and you think of like a negative thing, where does your mind kind of go to?
Well, honestly, the first thing it goes to for me is just the politicians not doing their job,
Mm-hmm.
whether it
100%.
be Democrat or Republican. There, it just they're neither one of them are doing their damn job. And the one person I can say who is trying to do something about it is the governor of the state who has most of that border, Ted Cruz. I've seen more videos of Ted Cruz down there at the border. Going up and down the river, learning how people are being snuck over. Which, yes, I get it. You want to get away from everything bad. Come as refugees. As far as I'm concerned, and I don't know if I can speak for everyone here, but this country is a melting pot. We
Mm-hmm.
want people to come here, but you got to go
100%.
about it the right way. So if you're running from violence, then come as a refugee. If you're just
So
trying to come to America to better your life, you have to go through the proper channels.
So on that note, because I generally agree with that. Like, so typically when I kind of think about something, I just take it at face value. Let's just say I totally agree with that. Let's just kind of apply the logic. You know what I'm saying? Let's just think about that logically. But then you got to apply it to life, right? So that kind of makes sense, right? If there's rules in place to do something the right way, we should generally try and do it the right way, right? But I think there's an issue there because, for example, we're talking about refugees. So, for example, in the last 4 years, we had one of the lowest, if not the lowest, refugee cap we've had in the history of our country, at least in modern times. So, to that end, if you are a refugee, but we're not allowing refugees to come in, which violates some of our own laws and also some international law to some regard, what's the answer for these people who are trying to do it the right way but are being blocked?
I get that, and yes, we've had some of the lower ones, yes. However, with the whole COVID outbreak thing being
Mm-hmm.
2019 to present, maybe that makes more sense right now. Purely on the safety of making sure that we're not making the situation worse.
Mm-hmm. Um, I believe so. I believe the refugee cap came into play before COVID was a thing. So so I
It
think
did.
if so, let's say it had been implemented like last year, I could say okay, there's like maybe something to be said for that, right? But I don't know if that reasoning necessarily works if it seems to have just been a general policy even before COVID. But with
Mm-hmm.
that being said, this is where I want to it's a kind of a tough point. So one of the things that actually, because ugly things can produce good things, or at least can have an impact that negates more negative things. And I don't know if everyone gets what I'm saying here, but Donald Trump's really tough rhetoric, right or wrong, I think a lot of it was wrong, did have an impact on the number of people coming to the border. All right. And so when people think, whether it's accurate or not, when people think the United States is going to be super tough on the border, super tough on traffickers, super tough on illegal immigration, that's going to impact your immigration rates to some degree. It just is. If anyone denies that, I don't think they're really paying attention to the rates juxtaposed to the rhetoric from whoever's in charge in the office. But that being said, we can utilize some level of tough rhetoric, but still make sure we're not doing things in an inhumane way. And to your point, at the very beginning, you said when you think about the immigration issue, you think about politicians, right? First, probably the fact that
Mm-hmm.
politicians aren't really addressing this. And I 100% agree. Because ideally, if we're going to address immigration, it should be done legislatively, right? It should be done through Congress because that kind of gives it more stability. And so let's just give an easy example. DACA with Obama. I actually think DACA was trying to do some decent things, but whether we like it or not, it was done through executive order, right? Which means it's left to the whims of the next president, right? Which means this group of people you're trying to protect don't actually have any sense of stability because they're just fluctuating between executive branches, right? Which is why if we wanted to get this done correctly, it should have been done through the legislative branch because then there's some more stability and it's a lot tougher to come and undo. And this has been a common problem across topics for us in the last 2 decades because when Congress can't get things done, presidents come into power and they just slap down more and more executive orders, which we've seen, right? More and more executive orders through the presidents, left and right.
I
So,
agree. I agree. Now, on that note, though,
mm-hmm.
so we go through the whole legislative process. We lock it in, we lock it down. Let's say, for instance, we came up with the perfect plan, 100% guaranteed, foolproof, but we don't secure the border. And in doing so, we can no longer enforce that. And if we can't enforce it, what good does it do? Because now they know, oh, well, we don't have to go through the proper channel. We have an easier way. We can slide
Mm-hmm.
in, like we've always done. So I feel like those two go hand in hand. You must reform immigration, but at the same time, in order to enforce that immigration, you must secure the border. I mean, look at most countries around the world. They have very secure borders. And in doing so, they're some of the safest countries to live in.
That's an interesting thing because, like, I think you classify yourself as an independent, right? Kind of. If you had to pick, like, would you say like you kind of lean with like some more libertarian views, maybe, and stuff like that, or?
That depends very hard on the subject. That is literally a minute case to case basis.
Okay,
Um,
gotcha.
so when it comes to immigration, I'm very hard on immigration, so I'm more conservative leaning. Um, pew pew control, because I'm not going to say the actual word because God forbid. Pew pew control. Hell no. I'm a conservative when it comes to that.
Yeah, I probably lean more with
I
you
grew up
on
in a
gun control.
military I grew up in a military home. My home was always protected by firearms. Since the age of 4, I knew how to hold one and how to be safe with it. Never one time in my entire life have I had an accidental discharge. Has anyone ever gotten hurt? Or have I ever done anything dangerous?
But
I've never killed anybody.
that hits something
Guns
important
don't
right
kill
there.
people. People kill people.
I actually would. We're probably gonna agree more on guns. I've done the whole gun control thing with my and some of my lives. I'd probably land more with the right on gun control, but I actually have my own kind of different views on all of that. We can dive. We should actually on another follow up. Maybe we should dive into the 2A sometime. But I do want to get back to that
I
kind of
think we
idea
should.
about I do want to get back to the idea about borders and just kind of like liberty, right? Because I think all of us really believe in the idea of liberty and true freedom, right? And
Yes.
that's why. And this is just kind of an idea I play with. I'm not an open borders guy necessarily, but one has to ask if you're a true liberty person, right? True freedom does not account for like freedom of movement, and if you haven't been around to have any kind of say in state lines, things like that, what what is it that actually makes you beholden to what might be an arbitrary state line? Like you weren't there to decide in that society. You weren't there for that. Why am I beholden to that? Let's just say I'm an open borders guy. Why am I beholden to state lines? Like what's the authority there? If we truly believe in free movement, liberty, and things of that nature.
Well, I honestly, I hate to say that. It is a state lines to me. There shouldn't be state lines. It should just be one country. But that's the way it was in the beginning. Yes, you had your smaller provinces. Now, these provinces were set up by the British government in order to regulate and control the populace of a country that was, a landmass that was months away from them. Unfortunately, we have continued to uphold these province lines, and it causes the. Hold on, conservative tech, you said it, because the states compete. Yes, it has caused the states to compete with one another. and in doing so, doesn't hold the whole nation accountable under one law. And I would hate to say it, but at the same time, it leans that way for the purpose of making sure that each individual has some rights protected in some way so as not to have the whole nation fall under a corrupt government at once. Basically gives time for an uprising, which was the whole purpose behind the Constitution.
Well,
Literally, it is the guideline layout of how to protect yourself from a corrupt government, and it tells them straight up, these are your rights given to you by God, not us,
does it
not
say
your
that in the
mom, not your
Constitution?
neighbor. Yeah, it's your God given. It says God given rights. I do believe. If I will, I would like if somebody could fact check that. But I do believe the Bill of Rights in there somewhere. It does state that it's your God given right.
The the Constitution actually doesn't make reference to God. The Declaration of Independence, I believe, might make reference to your God-given rights. So the Declaration of Independence in
Then that may be what
1776.
I'm.
Yeah.
Then that may be what I'm confusing and referencing.
But ultimately, the Declaration of Independence, while a really important document, and definitely gives mindset as to what kind of started this, we'll call it American experience out, right? Um, Ultimately, was just a few men's words on what they think this could be, but it actually wasn't our like government, it wasn't our constitution, things like that. So ideally, we're supposed to be a secular nation, actually, right? So we're not really supposed to be referencing any specific god because we're not supposed to be a nation that caters to one religion, right? That's kind of the whole idea of like, trying to break away from and have religious freedoms, right? And so I think the issue is
Yeah.
a lot of the people who came here originally, they kind of forgot that and they think that their religion's like the religion here. And it's like, no, actually, we respect all religions, including non religious here. At least we're supposed to. And I think we kind of fail to live up to that at times. Because a lot, and I'm not trying to be rude here, but a lot of people reference God to the Constitution, and it's just, nah, that's not a thing, which to me kind of usually implies that there's a certain group of people who are teaching people that on purpose, right? Because they want them to think that, but that's actually not a connection that we're supposed to make. Um, but with that being said, there is something to be said for the Declaration of Independence and laying out these rights, right? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which the Constitution then tries to ensure. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, but then let me ask you a follow up question. So if you think state lines are kind of problematic within a federal structure, right? So we're a federal government in the sense that there's the federal government, which then kind of has state governments, and there's local governments, right? There's kind of levels. Um, with that being said, if within a federal structure you're okay with kind of possibly playing with the idea that we don't need state lines, what about in a global community? Do we need national lines?
Until people can get past their differences and be able to see someone for who they are and what they are versus where they come from, yeah, yeah, because there are going to be people like Israelis and Iranians and Pakistani and Afghani and Iraqi that, just as an example,
You're good. No worries, man.
that don't get along, as well as Americans and a lot of Mexicans or um, the
So let me
white
give let
supremacist
me
Black Panthers, like,
let me help you out
you
here
know what
and
I
word this
mean?
in a way. Let me help you out and word this in a way that might not piss off people on my side. Um,
Yeah, good, good. Go ahead, because
because
I
I
think
think
you
what
get
you're
what I'm
alluding
trying to
to,
say.
yeah, I think what you're alluding to is the reality that while we're all humans, different aspects of the world do have different cultures and different ways of kind of going about things, right? So, for example, the Eastern world is typically more collectivistic. The Western world is typically more individualistic, and of course, that's a spectrum and range. But when those things clash, you're going to have a bit of a difficulty. So, let me give you an example of what you're talking about. I'm actually half Iranian, right? And my mom's,
Hmm.
California, Long Beach girl. So that culture clash has always been interesting, right? Because you see, for example, we're way more of a low context culture, right? We don't really give a shit who you are. We're gonna kind of speak our minds here, right? Whereas in my dad's culture, if someone's kind of like a boss or like a elder, you kind of respect that context, right? You don't necessarily say what's on your mind. It's kind of more about the context as opposed to you, right? But that kind of goes back to the more collective approach versus the more individual approach. I'm not going to say either one's right or wrong. It's just a difference we should be aware of, to your point. And until we can learn how to
Hmm.
navigate those differences, it's kind of hard to bring groups together.
Yes, exactly.
But, okay.
Yes, there's such a big divide with the world that Americans and Russians are never going to get along.
Hey,
What
that's not
in what
true. I have a
world?
Russian friend. Here's the thing, man. I'm gonna. I know I kind of just talked a lot.
You tell me that Biden and Putin are going to stand face to face and shake hands and be friendly? Come
I don't
on.
know. I don't know, but I do think there's the reality that, like, as I've gotten older. So when I was growing up, I was like, the CCP is inherently evil, right? The Soviet Union's inherently evil, right? Like, and I still don't think very highly of these countries. Like, don't get me wrong. But as I've gotten older, I've recognized that, dude, we are not. And this is a hard one because people get mad because they take these criticisms like I hate on America. But before I jump into this, I just want to kind of highlight my dad immigrated to this country um, with like $25 and no English, right? So and he's made a life of himself, right? We've like 100% right. So I understand the opportunity this country does afford in some sense, 100%, and I appreciate that like 100%, right? Because I wouldn't be here if not
Hmm.
for that. So I can't just shit on that. But there is the reality, especially post World War II. I don't think the direction we've taken as a nation and as an empire is good. I don't think it's positive, actually. I don't think our impact on the world has been a positive one. Um,
So, in saying that, if you don't mind me interrupting
yeah,
you
go
and
ahead. No,
asking
go ahead.
here,
You're good. Go ahead.
um, our impact on the world is not so great. And I believe that the reason why our impact on the world is not so great is because our impact on our own nation is not so great. A broken nation cannot heal broken wounds. So, in saying that, don't you believe that we should be focusing on us here in America and our veterans and our homeless and all that first before we go helping everybody else out?
Honestly, when I hear that, I don't. But I think I have a very different philosophy than most people, even like family and shit. So I think one of the huge issues with humans is we're incredibly tribal. This doesn't escape any of us. And what that looks like is basically we have this really serious in-group, out-group bias that's almost there from like the second we're kind of social beings, right? We start to have our own kind of thoughts as young ones. And so I think the issue is that often comes into play in different forms, right? So maybe the group you really identify with is your religious community, right? Maybe you take a lot of pride in your state, like them Texas fuckers, right? They love Texas, for example, right? Maybe you take a lot of pride in your nation, right? The United States. Maybe you take a lot of pride. It doesn't matter what it is. There's some kind of group that you kind of have. So there's a group that you value more, right? And I think the issue is, at the end of the day, when I'm walking down the road and if I see someone in need of help, I don't stop to ask if they're an American. I don't stop to ask if they have health insurance. I don't stop to ask if they crossed the border the right way. I see a human who needs help, so I help them. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly, and that's helping America first. Is that's what I'm talking about. Like, I don't mind helping other nations, but when we have such a serious crisis as we do with our homeless veterans and our VA, I'm sorry, the VA system is broken. I know it is because my grandfather spends months just trying to get an appointment.
I don't know much about
So
that, so I'll concede you on this. Go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, he just to get one appointment back in 2018, he spent 3 months setting it up, and then had to wait 2 more months just to get in, just to get a shot in his arm that he could have easily have gone to a regular hospital for. But if he wants to use his GI Bill and be able to be taken care of, he has to go to the VA. So we need to focus on them. Them men and women went to different countries. My grandfather went to Vietnam. Two of my grandfathers went to Vietnam. One of them, God rest his soul, is gone. They both seen shit that they will not talk to me about. They refuse. They tell me where they flew in, they told me where they spent their time, they told me when they flew out and from where. That's all I know, and that's all I'll ever know. All I know is that my grandfather can't stand to listen to a Trace Adkins song talking about Arlington without breaking down. Those are the men and women we need to be taking care of. They went over to fight for another country to make sure that they weren't taken over by a corrupt government, which, honestly, in Vietnam, we failed. We failed horribly.
I think the
And
issue
my
here is,
grandfather was welcomed home there by being spit in his face.
mhm. I think the issue here is it's tough, right? Because you want to respect people's lived experience, right? When people have seen, when people have done what they believe they're doing, right? but it goes back to a two-step thing. So I think you kind of hit it earlier, right? You kind of said that essentially the empire gets in the way of the nation, right? Like that's kind of how I split it up. I think there's two ways to analyze the United States, and you can't take these apart. But to kind of understand them, we can look at the U.S. as an empire, and then we can look at the U.S. as a nation. In reality, you have to bring both these things back together. But I think the biggest thing hurting our nation is the empire, and it's been an empire since 1945, driven by the military-industrial complex. So these veterans who we have to help, which we do have to help them, the reality is we're sending them out to protect the empire, not to protect the nation. So until we take down this whole like bullshit empire thing, because here's the thing, like, we don't, you can't help them. It's just tough, man. I'm kind of getting on my words here, but here's the thing:
When you
we're
talk empire, could you like
yeah, we have
explain a
150.
little bit more in depth when you
We have
mean
a
the
hundred.
empire?
So we have 150 plus military bases around the globe, for example.
Hmm.
How would you feel if China and Russia had military bases in Mexico and Canada?
I concede your point.
Right. So it's like it's a tough one. You know what I'm saying? Like I get it. It's because we see them as a threat to us in some way, right? But we're literally on their doorstep. You know what I'm saying? We're
I think the reason why we have those bases, though, is because we're part of NATO. And being
mhm.
part of NATO, we have to be a global force in which we can respond when called upon. That was what happened with Vietnam. NATO came in, NATO called for help, America responded. We were able to do so so quickly because we weren't just all sitting here chilling in America all willy nilly. We had ships around the world, we had bases around the world, we had personnel around the world where we could send help for people who really, really needed it. So you talk about wanting to help the world, but without those bases, it takes so much longer and it makes it so much harder to do it
So
quickly.
I don't think NATO actually had much to do with Vietnam. Honestly, I could be wrong on this. This is something I'd probably go back. I would probably look at myself tonight. I'd follow up on just to make sure I'm not talking out of my ass here. But someone check me on this. But I'm fairly sure NATO didn't actually have much to do with Vietnam, if anything. And I'm fairly certain the idea of NATO is so that one country doesn't have to have bases all over the place, right? The idea of NATO is so that we're supposed to have strategic partnerships, which then we can kind of come together as a collective of nations to usually take down a rogue nation or something like that, right? So I think the issue is, I think you just kind of hit it. I think there's a bit of a disconnect here, right? So I think we just agreed that America might not be a force for good, actually, right? Which means we then have to reconsider if we're actually building these bases for a positive thing or to maintain control.
It has to be for a positive thing because if anybody is willing to maintain control, if it's to maintain control, then that immediately states that our government is corrupt and needs to be risen up against.
Exactly.
At that point it is a literal call to arms for the United States citizens to stand up and rise up and take over right here, right now.
I would argue, I mean, dude, honestly, I would argue that with that logic, right? For like, if we agreed that the U.S. is what I think it might be, that's reason not just for American citizens to stand up, right? Because our tax dollars go to this, bro. You know what I'm saying? Like, so here's the thing, like when we talk about healthcare and things like that, we're talking about things that cost hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe like hundreds of billions of dollars, right? We spent, and this is not an exaggeration, $5 trillion plus on the war on terror. And I don't think people understand what a staggering difference there is between trillions of dollars and even billions. It's staggering. Like we're talking like the difference between, if you were to do this in time, you're talking the difference between 1 million would be like 31, like would be 1 million would be like 31 days, in terms of time, right? Broke down to seconds. 1 billion would be like 31 years, and a trillion would be like, we're talking like tens of thousands of years, right? So now think about that in terms of money, and that's how much money in terms of trillions we're spending on war. So when our oligarchs are telling us that we have to protect the world, we have to do all these things, but we realize, wait, we've extended ourselves across the globe onto the doorsteps of all these people we call our enemies, and yet all this is done to protect us. But we can't get healthcare, we can't get education, right? It's super polarized here. We're at each other's throats. What's the point of all of this if it's not actually helping the nation? It means it's not actually for the nation. It's for the oligarchs who have extended themselves beyond America, right? I think that's something we have to recognize is the corporate powers that be are not just doing this to America, right? They have a large impact across the globe.
Right, and a big part of the corporate powers to be, I'm glad I can quickly touch on the subject because it touches on your name, is the freaking media.
Mm-hmm. 100%.
Now,
I'm gonna
quite
warn you. This is
frankly,
my field. This is
CNN
my
is
field of study. This is
full
my
of
field of
shit.
study. So this is my whole thing. CNN sucks, MSNBC sucks, Fox News sucks. It's important to realize, like, when you're looking at media, this is really general. It's like more complex than this. But when you're looking at media, there's kind of three levels to it: level one, level two, level three. All right. So level one media, these are generally reliable sources. They can be left or right; it doesn't really matter because I'm less concerned about bias when it comes to sources. But they have a good fact-based approach, right? These are your typical level one media sources. Then there's level two media sources, right? These are not outright propaganda, but they're corporate spin, partisan spin. They don't fully represent the truth, right? They don't necessarily lie, but they kind of omit things and things like that. And they're very sensationalized. This is where Fox, CNN, MSNBC land to some degree, all right? You're just kind of this mess of media, which is what most media looks like to some degree. Then there's level three. This is like outright trash. This is just blatant disinformation, blatant misinformation, outright propaganda that's just meant to muddy the waters. And that's where you're talking about like an InfoWars, things like that, right? So what people don't realize on the left and right is there's actually decent sources out there from both sides, right? There's decent sources that cater towards a libertarian perspective. There's decent sources that cater towards a conservative perspective, and there's decent sources that cater towards a more left-leaning perspective, even more extreme left-leaning perspective. But what's important to recognize with your source is, are they honest about their bias? Are they clear in terms of how they source, right? And how is their fact-based approach? So, what are some of the sources you like to go to, maybe?
Quite honestly, personally, I find I I watch a little bit of everything, simply for the fact that I can then get the whole story and nitpick out the truths and piss the lie, and and kind of. I would like to say that this is one of the first, or one of the few times in this debate here that we were able to find a common ground between Democratic and Republican here. Um, and that's our view on the media being bought, like on the media being lie tellers. Like,
So how about this? If you, cause I hear that, because I as a media major, I really try to read it all, right? I try to understand it. There's some sources I can be a little less critical with, but I try to check it all because you got to know it all. But when you wake up in the morning, because I think we all have one, if you had to go, like, what's your number one spot you go to first place, probably most often, if there's just somewhere you had to go to?
well, I'll be honest. First thing I check is Fox, but after
That's totally
that,
cool.
I check everything else, and then I go to Snopes.
I just want to say I actually respect you giving that honest answer, considering what I just said and considering how you knew that would come across. So that's actually like one of the things that like you're gonna get blasted for that in my comments. I'm not gonna lie, because you know how we feel about Fox.
I already
But
I knew I was going to catch a lot of hate for
but
it, but
but I think the most important thing in these conversations is the fact that we have to be honest, and the fact that you're willing to be honest about that means way more to me than like trying to fucking sidestep and bypass the conversation, right? Um, so I actually like my biggest. I would just my advice, because I used to watch a lot of Fox News, is just understand and take it for what it is. When we're looking at Fox News, there's three different entities. All right, there's Fox Business, there's Fox Newswing, and there's Fox Entertainment. All right, Fox Entertainment. You're talking about Hannity, Tucker. That's outright trash. I have no problem saying that. That goes for any kind of CNN, MSNBC. Anything that's entertainment from a cable news network is just trash. Rachel Maddow, trash. Things like that, right? So with that being said, within a Fox newscast or Fox Business, you can still find decent stories. I still would say be pretty critical, follow up on other things. Um, let me give you a suggestion. If you want to start with the right leaning source, start with Cato Institute. Their funding comes from some people on the right that not everyone's going to like. But I find it's a generally decent libertarian perspective source. It's more right leaning. It's really well sourced. They have a lot of good data. There's a think tank that puts out their own information. Check them out. So, in my opinion, people can disagree with this. I'm just kind of give a little blast here. If everyone wants to find a decent source from the right that kind of has my stamp of approval, check out Reason, check out Cato Institute, even the American Conservative. I'm not going to say you're going to like every story. I disagree with most of what they say, but they offer a healthy perspective that's generally pretty well fact checked. Those are a few I kind of tossed out there. Forbes is they're solid-ish. Things like that. Maybe The Economist, right? Those are some right-leaning sources I'd probably start with.
you know, personally, um, I like Hannity and I like Tucker, and I say this because when it comes down to them breaking the story down, they don't sugarcoat shit. They just lay it out there on the line for you. Um,
So let me tell you something. Did you
And
know
that's
that?
and to be it constant. It can, in my opinion, that's the way it needs to be anymore. Too many people beat around the bush for people that don't want to get their feelings hurt, and when people say something and it pisses somebody off, it's just like, oh, okay, well, get over it. I mean, when I was growing up, it was riding in the back of trucks, bouncing all over the place, um, it, getting tossed off of a bridge into the river to go swimming. Like, there was no cry corners, there was no safe spaces, there wasn't no, oh, he hurt my feelings because he said bad words. It was, well, go deal with it.
So let me address this because I think this is an important one. People aren't going to like this one, but this is one I'm going to be pretty staunch on. Just because Tucker Carlson and Hannity are just not sources to go to. Like they're just not, and here's why. So did you know that Fox News got sued over Tucker Carlson? And do you know what their defense was in court? That
Hmm.
won, by the way. This was granted, and they won the case. The judge granted this. Their defense was this is entertainment, it's hyperbole, it's sensationalism, and no reasonable person would believe this. And the judge said, you know what, you're right, and they granted that. So I'll leave it there. It's information. You do with it what you want. I'm not even saying drop Fox as a whole. I'm just suggesting go more to the Fox News side of things, like a Brett Baer type maybe, or no, pardon me, Chris Wallace type, for example. But I used to listen to Hannity, dude. Like straight up, I grew up on Sean Hannity, no joke. When I was like driving soccer practice and whatnot. But again, I study media, homie. Like, there's lots of good sources on the right. Tucker and Hannity are just not them. What their job is to do is to sensationalize. Like they're like, so you know, like the dreaded media you don't like on the left. They're the same version on the right. Tucker and Hannity are. So I actually agree with you that there's really bad left wing sources like CNN and whatnot, but Tucker and Hannity represent the same thing on the opposite side. Is what I would suggest. So again,
Well,
dude, go ahead.
so okay, so let's jump onto something here right now. Then before we start running out of time on other
Yeah, where are
concepts
we at?
here.
Oh shit.
Um,
Let me pause you real quick,
the
guys. We're gonna go for
biggest.
another 15. Let me pause real quick, my dude. We're gonna go for about another 15 minutes, and then we're probably gonna do the last 10 minutes for a Q&A. Sound good?
Oh
Perfect.
yeah. I completely forgot we planned that out.
You're good.
Um,
Go ahead.
the big one. Biden after his first 100 days, and the debacle that was we the people means the government. Where do
What
you
did you?
stand on that?
So we the people means the government.
Yeah, during
Well,
his what was supposed to be the State of the Union address,
hmm What? Well, I guess
he said the
what's
he said,
problematic
and
about
I
that?
quote, "Well, we the people means we the people of the United States, not we the people of the government of America."
Well, define government for me.
Okay, let's say everything from feds to all the way down to the deep state. Legit everything. We all know that there's other people going on pulling strings behind the background and behind the curtain. We're all
So with
you can't
respect,
tell me
that's
that everybody in the world's dumb.
no, they're definitely not. With respect, though, that's actually not a definition of government. That's a definition of what you think the U.S. government currently looks like. I'm going to ask for a definition of government. So just what government is supposed to be in general, not what you think the U.S. government looks like, right? Because I would probably agree with an aspect of that. Because if I was like to
Well,
define our government,
if you want to get technical, like literal, like collegiate or high school terms, it's just a governing body. Um,
hmm, essentially a government,
so
yeah, exactly. So I would go back to that, right? So a government is literally just decision making, group decision making, right? And who's the group? We the people, right? And who are we the people? The decision makers. We then comprise government. So this is actually a really key thing. In my opinion, conservatives hate the idea of government so much because we vilify it so much. But we are the government. We are media. We are these things. But we teach ourselves to like have this fear of it to the point where we keep ourselves separate from these things, which we're a part of. We create government. We make government. We run government. We hold government accountable. We are government. The people are government because that's decision making.
right. So still, like I asked, do you believe that means us as the people?
Ideally, it
And do
should.
you agree that he was wrong there, or are you backing him?
I have no issue with the statement whatsoever. I'd have to probably with this saying, let me go like watch it for full context again. Right, we'll probably revisit this. But that statement in of itself, the way you described it, I have no problem with it at all. Because again, I think that's what we're supposed to be. We have to get back to remembering that we are government. You know what I'm saying? Like you, me, your family, my family. Though I think the biggest problem in this country is the fact that we don't recognize that we are the government. So you know when people talk about term limits, for example, like, oh, we need term limits. That to me is some of the dumbest shit, bro. It's like we are term limits. Why don't we go vote them out? Why do we need term limits? Just go vote them out after 2 years if they're in Congress, right? But we don't utilize our right to vote. We don't utilize our right to be engaged
And
citizens, and they want that. They want us to be
and
afraid of
that's
government. They don't want us to be engaged.
and see, and therein lies an issue. And let me set a good example.
Good.
Saddam Hussein in Iraq, they had legal votes, they had a voting process, and every single time he would win. You're telling me then people wanted him? You're
But
out of your mind.
I don't fully get that. I don't get that point. You mind kind of expanding on that for me?
Term limits. He didn't have
Oh
term
yeah,
limits.
but
He
that
was
but that
able to
applies.
just say, no, you vote for me or it's a problem. And in doing so, rigged or defrauded his election.
So you actually have a semi decent point here, but here's because let me kind of flesh that out. The problem is you're comparing a situation that I would consider kind of lawful, like it's not really lawful. It's more of a chaotic structure that's kind of authoritarian, versus our country where we still do have some semblance of a republic. We're probably an oligarchy at this point, if not trending towards it. But it's hard to compare those two situations because we still have the right to vote. We still have all those things, whereas they don't actually have the right to vote, right? So, for example, Iran, my dad's from Iran. Every few years there's an election, right? It's not a fucking election. The government just dictates what it says, and that's that. And the same people always want to win, right? So I don't think that's a great response because I don't think the situations are comparable. Again, because we do have because we can vote people out, right? And if we show up to vote, it actually happens. There, if they show up to vote, same end. If they don't show up to vote, same end. Here, if we show up to vote, it ends differently. We just don't show up. You kind of see what I'm saying there? Does that kind of make sense? But I
I
do hear your point
suppose so,
because
yeah.
to kind of concede to your point, it goes back to we aren't exactly the republic we think we are anymore, right?
Well, see, that's in the eye of the beholder. If you are a U.S. citizen and you stand behind the words of the Constitution and you stand behind the words of the Declaration of Independence and you think just like our forefathers did, which, if you go and you read it, I have a video that on my page of a scene from the movie National Treasure where they read a section of it and he states, people just don't talk like that anymore. Today and now, I am seeing more and more and more that people are starting to talk like that again. So
Like the
it's all in
framers.
the eye of the beholder. We give the power to where we put it. So if we stand up and we say, we're no longer going to allow you to keep thinking that you're in control when you know damn good and well who is.
So I guess I'm kind of confused. Not fully, but like, what do you mean? Like when you say like talk like a certain way, like how would you like? So what's that way they're talking like?
Just in, oh man, hold on. Yeah, let's see if
That's gonna be tomorrow, Luna. I got like 3 lined up for the next couple days, and I think he might have just not realized he can't go check a video while he's in a live. So let's see here. I know change. I know. I know. I know, guys. I know. I'm trying here. All right, let me do this real quick. I'm gonna try and invite him back in here because I'm not trying to cut the dude off. Shit. Yeah, I know like everyone's like hoping for like some drag out debate, but it's actually not what I'm trying to do here. So don't get me wrong, if someone goes nasty at me, I'll cut them down, but he's it's not letting him it won't let me invite him. God damn it. That kinda sucks. Let me try and reach out to him real quick here. Also, I do have another one lined up by 7:05. Let me go try and reach out to him real quick. Hey, if you're watching this video. Jesus. Alright. Yeah, so like I know okay, so let me just give you guys a little fucking insight into my mind since you're here. Debate is a fucking buzzword, alright? So when I say debate, people have this image of like two people like, arguing and like all that jazz, and so that wasn't actually the goal of what I'm trying to do here. I actually want to have discussions. It's just if you say, hey guys, I challenge you to a discussion, no one's gonna fuck with that. Oh, cool. Sweet! Alright, so
My apologies. I did not know it would do that.
you're good. I was about to say don't, but you're good. Did you find the vid though?
Well, it wasn't so much the video. I was just trying to look up, or pull the Constitution up so I could, or the Declaration, so I could give an excerpt from it because it was that one particular line that really struck me. It was talking about the resolve of the American people, and it's just like the way they spoke, the way they word their words, the way they put pen to paper back in those days, the way they expressed feeling rings hard and deep. And it was meant to do that for a reason.
So I think this is okay. So it's gonna sound like a weird comparison, but just hear me out for a second here. So like we always think, man, like the '70s has such good music, man, like the '80s has such good music, right? But it's like we didn't get to hear all this shit from the '70s, '80s. We just heard the classics that withstood the test of time, right? We didn't get to hear all this shit from back then. We just heard the classics that withstood the test of time, right? So to that end, I think there's lots of people in this world who speak like that. I just think it's kind of hard to find sometimes. So I just give the example of someone named Maryam Rajavi, for example. She's a freedom fighter who's been battling the Iranian regime for 40 years now. She leads the NCRI. She leads the National Council for Resistance Against Iran. I think she speaks incredibly passionately about secularism, about democracy, about freedom, about human rights, about women's rights in the Middle East. I know she gives me a lot of fucking passion and want to stand up. So to your point, I think your point was it kind of depends on perspective ultimately. It's kind of what you're going back to because that's sort of about the Republic, right? So, I mean, yeah, it depends on perspective. But I think if we're going to admit that maybe the empire is not as good as we think it is, and that maybe our media climate's not good, we have all these problems. I think there's a disconnect in not recognizing that we're not the Republic we think we are either, right? I think the issue we have is some people want to be super pro-America, right? Because it feels like we're supposed to be. It feels like, right? But there's a lot of shit wrong, and maybe this whole pro-American mindset is getting in the way of fixing the wrong.
To me, that's how you fix the wrong. When you're not pro America and you're pro everything else, you kind of lose your values. You then change. You lose who you were. It's like going from the farm to the big city and forgetting where the hell you came from.
So how about this? What are some of those values then? When I say the USA, what are the values you think of?
When you say USA and values, I think Patriots. I literally think of the movie The Patriot. I think of
Do you think there's a
soldiers
difference
fighting
between
in.
Do you think there's a difference between patriotism and nationalism?
Oh, yeah.
How would you define nationalism?
Nationalism is somebody who just wants to allow the government to run as they see fit and just live their life and sit back and just do as is. A patriot is one who stands up for his rights and stands up for what he believes in and will die fighting for it.
So I I kind of see where you're getting at, but I think I would probably use a different definition myself. And this is just how I would describe it. There's an actual definition we can point to, but I think the easiest way to get this point across is I would define, and let me know if you disagree, but I would define nationalism as toxic, blind love of country, and I would call patriotism healthy, critical love of country.
Well, that's exactly right. But you're touching on exactly as I'm saying. A patriot is somebody who came into this world kicking, screaming, and covered in blood, and has no quarrels going out the exact same way he came in, fighting for what he believes in. That is a patriot.
And question: what if a patriot has to acknowledge the fact that sometimes the red, white, and blue isn't fighting for the same thing that he thought they were fighting for anymore? For example, as when I think of the values of this nation, I think of freedom, right? I think of the republic. I think of voting. I think of religious freedom. I think of secularism, right? I think of a melting pot. I think of an experiment that is so different from so many different societies, and the fact that this does allow for space for so many different people to exist as it currently stands today. Um, I think the issue is, for
Well,
example, so one of the first things. So this is a good point. So one of the first things you alluded to was fighting, right? Fighting the military. And what is one of the biggest things I think is the issue with America right now? Our military-industrial complex and all those military bases, right? So is it possible that some of the things that you value in America are the propaganda that kind of leads us to promote the empire, right? The military, kind of Vietnam, being across the globe. Is it possible?
that is where the nationalism government comes into play and is brainwashing the people. When it's America, its people, its lands, its flag, its values, what the Constitution and the Declaration stands for. Anybody who wants anything more than that is a tyrant. There should be no control. The government
So,
oversteps its bounds daily, including Joe Biden. And
so
in my experience through life, I will say that I feel like the best years for me were under Trump's administration. I did the best financially. I did the best at home. I did the best at work. I had my life, my liberty, my pursuit of happiness, and I had no fear for my rights. Since Biden started running, I was worried.
but I have a question. So that's a good thing. So worry can come from fear, right? But is fear always rational? How long has Joe Biden? So how long has Joe Biden been on the scene in this country?
Just barely over 100 days, and that man has made more mistakes as a
No, no,
president
no,
than I
no.
can shake a
How
stick at.
how long has he been a predominant player in the United States government?
Oh,
Like a
and in the United States government, okay, in that case, well over, what, 40 years?
mm-hmm. So question: what are you so afraid of? You know what he's about,
Yeah, trash.
and what's he done in the last 40 years that's like so crazy?
Have you not seen any of the
It's
videos
not
that
about
have him
this
speaking?
is it's not about me. It's about you. What do you think that he's done that's so crazy? Just you have to give me something, right? What is some piece of knowledge or something you've seen that you think he's done? Something specific, not just I think he's no good.
His stance on court packing. Back in the time when they were getting ready to pack the court the last time, he was calling for a no-go. And then he stands here during his campaign and I quote says, "The American people don't deserve to know my stance on court packing, but vote for me."
So here's the thing: court packing. There's this misconception that court packing is simply adding more justices to the court. That's one form of court packing, but it's not all that court packing is. Court packing is any maneuver, right? It's any maneuver through partisan ends to change what should be the dynamic of the court, right? So, to that end, let's go back in time here. So, I'll actually concede. Sure, liberals want to court pack. I agree. A lot of liberals want to court pack right now. But we have to follow the timeline. What happened in Obama's last year as the president with like a year left? What happened in regards to court packing
Uh,
or not court packing?
I don't think I can even
It's a vague
quote
question. So like
anything on that
if you
one.
don't know where I'm going, yeah, it's kind of a vague question, right? Where are you going with this, right? Well, remember, with about a year left, he had the opportunity to nominate a Supreme Court justice who would then be voted upon, right? That's the right of a president, right? And let's just before I even dive in that story, What did Donald Trump just do at the very end of his presidency, right? Amy Coney Barrett, with like less than a month, right? He pushed her through, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have
Okay.
a question for you. With a year, so if Trump was allowed to, with a few weeks left in his presidency, why wasn't Obama allowed to, with a year left from Mitch McConnell? Why did the Republicans switch course on that just a few years later when they set the precedent that with less than a year left, a president should not nominate someone to the Supreme Court? Okay, if that's the rule, fair. But then how come just 4 years later, when it was even less time, Trump was allowed to? Mitch McConnell was okay with it then, and they rammed it through an even shorter time. Is that not court
I
packing?
mean, no, but
Why
that's
not?
just filling a spot.
But then why
Now,
couldn't Obama fill a spot?
well, I can't tell you why Obama couldn't fill a spot other than the fact that at the time, the people who the United States citizens voted in to that Congress and that House and that Senate said that it was a no go. Why they decided
Oh,
to
so we
change and
don't.
say it was
So let me
okay,
pause you. So let me pause you. That's that you just moved the goalposts. So it's not actually their right to fill the spot then, right? Because what just happened in this vote? Did we not just vote Trump out? Did the American people not just vote him out?
and that's debatable.
Oh, here we go. This is the one I actually wanted to jump into is the election. So why is that debatable?
Come on, 130,000
All
votes
right, shit. I actually got to pause you.
sequentially in Michigan.
I've got a debate in 10 minutes technically. So here's what we're gonna do. I will do a follow up on this where I think we should dive into court packing in the election. Sound fair? Because it's a big topic. I don't think we can hash it out in 5 minutes because we should do that Q&A. Because I only have 5 more minutes
Yeah,
technically on this one. But here's what we'll do. We'll run it back and we'll probably keep going in that conversation. Cool.
yeah, we can do
All right.
that.
So with that
Because
said,
I'll be totally honest, that is a very passionate subject for me.
same, 100%. Which is why it's a
Purely
good
for
one to
the
have.
simple fact that I have just, with everything that happened this year, it should be scrutinized anyways. It should be scrutinized anyways, purely because we had to have so many write-in votes because of the whole COVID. It should have been scrutinized from top to bottom, plain and simple, just to make sure that the American people could feel safe about what happened.
So were you ever concerned with the military use mail-in voting for Donald Trump or Utah or Oregon or other states?
Like
Or just this year all of a
every
sudden?
no, purely because of the whole COVID and having so many mail-in ballots.
No, we have a system for that already, right?
Mm, do you fully trust it?
Yeah, because I know how it actually works, so I trust things I understand.
I mean, I understand computers, I trust computers, and I trust people's eyes. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to trust that if you've got a bunch of these ballots just flipping through a machine, I'm going to believe what comes out on the other side. I
So
work
did you know these
retail.
machines? So did
I
you know
know
that
that
every
that coin
machine?
counter doesn't count right every time.
So did you know that every machine actually has, and not every, but out of 49 states, I believe there might be one state that doesn't do this. It's not legally required, but I think they're actually addressing it. Every single machine has a mandated paper count that you can verify with. Did you know that? So
Okay.
every electronically tabulated vote has a paper vote you can verify with, which they do verify with.
Okay.
Also, this is something
So,
people have to understand. At the local level, there's automatic recounts if a vote's close enough. Literally, if a vote's close enough, doesn't matter what anyone says, it triggers an automatic recount. You have that. There's automatic reviews that different state and different local election commissions have that they do just without any set time. They just do audits on these things already. Literally. So, for example, Arizona before this Cyber Ninja audit already did 3 full audits, which we paid for, by the way. Our taxpayer dollars paid for those audits, by the way. Right. So Arizona, for example, already did 3 full audits. So we have audits you can demand for, automatic audits, right? You have automatic recounts. You have recounts you can demand for, which come from the local and state level, right? Then your executive branch can overlook these things and these claims, fraudulent claims, through the DOD, the DOJ, and CISA, right? DOD being Department of Defense, DOJ being Department of Department of Justice, and CISA being the Cyber Security Infrastructure Security Agency. And all these people had leadership put in place by Trump, who oversaw all of this, right? William Barr, Christopher Krebs. We also have our courts at the state, the federal, and the SCOTUS level, right? So the state courts, right? The federal courts, the federal circuits, and our Supreme Court all have had 70 plus cases related to this, and all have ruled against Trump for two different reasons: procedural and lack of evidence, right? And then we can also just look to the independent third-party watchdog groups that Trump himself brought in. His administration had come watch. They've all verified these things. So it's actually super easy to confirm. In fact, our House and our Senate confirmed the election, right? All of these things have happened. So the military, in fact, even the military said Joe Biden's the president, right? So at some
Okay.
point, I think people have to accept it.
Okay. So let me ask you this then. You build a machine, a mechanical machine. It works as designed, correct?
Mm-hmm.
You write software. It's supposed to work as designed, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Does it always?
Yeah, but then that's why we follow up and then we verify it. So the simple question of do things go wrong doesn't work when we actually have a process to follow up on that, which I just described to you.
Okay. So what you're saying, okay, so what you're saying here is this paper is going through this machine, being tabulated by this machine, and then how are they supposed to know about the difference? Okay, yes, it counted the vote.
But that's why you
It
have
says
audits,
it
right?
counted that
But
vote.
boom, see,
So
to your point.
is that why you go back and then
That's why
if
you have audits and recounts, both of them. The recounts ensure exactly. But what I say, we have audits, do we not? And I'll just, for example, give you an example of Arizona going through 3 audits, right? And so
yeah,
that's the point, though.
exactly. So do
But
you
that's not.
oppose
But
the audit there?
what's the? Yeah, at this point, absolutely, 100%. Because here's why. Who's the company doing this audit?
Cyber somebody.
Cyber Ninjas. What? How many election audits have they done before? Do you know the number? It should
Zero.
be a
And
lot.
if
It
I'm
should be
not
a lot fewer.
mistaken, as far as I'm concerned, right now with the way the government's set, zero audits ever being done on elections for them is the perfect thing to do.
Bro, I'm sorry. That's where I'm gonna just call you out. That's wrong. So this is the problem with conservatives, in my opinion. When it suits you guys, people with no experience can help you. That's just a terrible mindset, bro. Come on, man. Really? So
We're
someone.
not
So hold on
saying
a
that
second.
we
So
we're
hold on a
not
second. Hold
saying
on a
that a
second.
Trump
No,
won
no,
that
no, no.
Biden
Forrest,
couldn't
I'm
do
gonna
it.
call you out. I'm calling you out on this, bro. I'm calling you out on this because the whole idea is you guys want to trust the election, but then a company with no experience in this is gonna have access to our votes and our private information. Really? Come on, man. That's secure to you? You don't trust all these entities I just named, but a company with no experience in this is going to have all access to this, and you're okay with that, though, because the Republicans said so.
I mean, in the end, if Trump had won, Biden administration could have done the same thing
No, they
with the
couldn't have,
same
because
group of people.
did we do this 4 years ago? Did we
No,
call out like
but
random
you could have.
groups, like random audit people? And we don't do that because it's destructive to democracy, bro. That's destructive.
I'd have to say we'd have to agree to disagree on that one.
Yeah, but it's not a factual disagreement. But at this point, I'm gonna let you wrap up. Go ahead and wrap up. I do have to run because I got a guy in literally 3 minutes technically. So, ending time. Do your thing. I'll wrap up after you, and we'll follow up.
Um, quite honestly, if we're ever going to make up any ground in this country, we got a long way to go. Obviously, because views are just way too askewed on both sides. Um, hmm. I don't know. I'm
Cool.
kind of speechless at this point.
Got you. I'll end it, my dude. So appreciate you for stepping up. We had a good conversation. I do find this is often a tough point for people is the election because they don't like it when you lay out the entire process and they're forced to confront that. But I'll keep doing that with anyone because it is probably the most important topic to me. Because to your point, we cannot have a nation if people don't respect our elections. So, and I don't think you guys respect our elections, obviously. But I do respect you for stepping up, my dude. Like straight up, I think we had a good conversation. I appreciate your kind of background, your family, and some of what they've done, right, in terms of the military and stuff like that. I appreciate you kind of talking about some of your experience and your thoughts on the Declaration of Independence and some of our rights and things like that. I appreciate your honesty when it comes to sources. That was cool. There's a lot of people that BS there. And I'm open to do this again if you want, my dude. All right.
Oh yeah, we definitely got to keep going because there's a whole lot more we got to go over.
Cool. All righty, my dude. Have a good one, man. Take care of yourself.